Ideal client for a PACE loan with interest rates higher than other types of borrowing and a variety of associated risk? Is this program just for those whose credit is not strong enough to secure financing elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one that I asked first of the PACE providers before we brought anything forward. What I've heard is that the people who are doing this face different barriers and in general are not sort of lower income, high risk clients. I'm told that they are, in some cases, able to get a home equity line and want to use that equity for something else in their home. They may have tried to get an equity line and have equity, but the equity line wasn't possible because the term wasn't long enough, say for a solar installation. So what I've heard is that the barriers are numerous enough in the existing financing tools that people aren't taking them even when they have pretty good credit, equity in their home, and ways that you would think would enable them to make these investments themselves. And so I do not want this to be a tool for low-income, bad credit clients. This is where it does not make sense, right? And so that's why our education will be key. Our education of the contractors will be key, and our accountability of the PACE local governments and of the contractors will be really important. So the type of client is one that either doesn't have or doesn't want to use the cash on hand for these types of projects, but has not been able to find the right fit in terms of an existing financing solution. So the full toolbox of financing tools will need to be shared with everyone because it's a hard sort of market to understand. So I'm going to do lots of research. I'm going to talk to lots of people beforehand, include that in the educational workshops to make sure people know all of their options and choose the one that fits best for them.
Great, thank you. This question's for Bill. At the state level, what utility policies would have the greatest impact on increasing solar usage in the Sunshine State?
Oh boy. Well, probably, the single biggest thing that we've got right now is that we do not allow power purchase agreements in the state of Florida. How many people know what a PPA is? Okay, so I need to explain that. So a power purchase agreement is basically an arrangement where you have a third party that comes in and installs the solar array, and they actually own and operate that system and sell the electricity as it's generated to the end user. So for instance, if it was a household, I would, my company or whatever would come in, we would install the system for no cost up front, and you would just buy the electricity as it's generated on your rooftop. Those structures have been used in a number of other states and have really led to the explosion of solar in places like California, New Jersey, North Carolina. And the way I think about it is kind of like, imagine if the only way that you could own a house was to purchase it outright, to actually, just take ownership. If you couldn't rent a house or an apartment, or you couldn't, rent a car or lease a car, I mean, how many people would be riding on bicycles and homeless? We would have a lot of that, right? And so we need these novel structures, these financial structures, to be able to open these markets up, because the reality is that solar is a big investment. There's no question that it's a big investment up front. It's a good investment. Most of our clients see returns of between 12 and 15%, and I think the other solar contractors would mirror that. But how many people have $20,000 to $40,000 just burning a hole in their pocket? So we need these other types of structures to be able to do that, and that's really been something that the utility companies, unfortunately, have resisted very strongly.
Gotcha. This is a question kind of for anybody on the panel. Many low-income families rent. How do you see solar and renewable energy being implemented so that people who are not homeowners benefit?
I think, again, you have to look out of state to see some examples of how this is working. One model is called community solar, and that has actually some different expressions, but in one of those expressions, you could have, for example, form a nonprofit organization that owns its own solar array that local community members can subscribe to. So that's a way of providing access for people who wouldn't be able to afford to install the array. That's also something that's useful for people such as myself who live under a massive live oak tree. I mean, it's not feasible to install solar at my house. So that's one approach. There are other approaches that include on-bill financing. of energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements where the utility actually pays for it, because the utility saves money in the long run by not having to build new expensive gas-fired plants. So there are some approaches, but it's a major challenge right now, and if there aren't specific structural interventions to address it, what you're going to see is, in most cases, the people that will be able to transition to solar are those who can afford to transition to solar, and we're going to have what some commentators are calling a green divide, where more affluent families can buy in, and you'll have others who are on the outside of that.
Anybody else want to weigh in, or
yeah, actually, I can jump in here too. The technical term for the community solar kind of structure, the financial structure is actually called virtual net metering. So the idea is that you get credit on your bill for the subscription amount of solar that you have bought into, and you can apply that on your own electrical bill at your house. And that's one of the major issues with the net metering law that we have in Florida, is that when you have solar panels on, meter A, utility company meter A, you cannot apply that savings to another account that you have. It's meter for meter. You've got to have individual solar arrays for each one. The other one is back to what I was talking about with the PPA structures, especially in rental situations. You can't, in most rentals today, if you actually look at the electrical infrastructure, they have individual electrical meters for each apartment in the apartment complex. And so the building owner cannot put in a single large solar array and then sell that energy back to his own tenants. That's actually against the law in Florida today. So this goes back to this, we need some changes in terms of state policy to allow these kinds of structures to take place. And the key with that would be that PPA thing, because then that building owner could actually own that solar array, and he could sell that solar energy to those tenants as they use it.
Gotcha. This one's for Lee Hayes. A couple questions about the PACE program. Could they work with condominium associations or homeowners associations as a whole to, work with large numbers of people rather than individual homeowners?
Yeah, so I am currently talking to a group of condo associations, and we are going to work through that together. I've asked the PACE providers, and they do have a history of working with condo associations, but it gets complicated about who owns what. So the outdoor section of a condo is owned by the association, and they don't pay the property taxes. So unless the association gives the ownership to the individual unit owners, they can't put it onto their assessments. So we're going to work through those complications, because particularly in parts of our community, there's a lot of condo associations we could reach a lot of residents very quickly. We just have to figure out those legal implications. And the homeowners associations are easier, because the single-family homeowners own their properties outright. It's just an issue of communicating through the homeowners associations to get the word out about these opportunities. So same thing that was offered by Sean. If you all have a homeowners association that would like to learn more about this, I'm certainly available to come and talk to them about the opportunity and explain the pros and cons that way.
And for Bill, a couple questions about the battery technology you mentioned. How long do the solar batteries last? What happens when they're retired? Are they disposed of in landfills? Is that an issue for sustainability going forward?
That's a great question. In terms of how long they last, the lithium-ion technology, it's a lithium iron oxide technology. The Tesla battery has a 10-year warranty, which, if you think about just kind of traditional lead acid batteries, most of those have, you're lucky to get a year's warranty out of those. And part of the reason they can do that is because the battery systems nowadays have a lot of intelligence and kind of management features that are built in on top of the layer of the actual physical battery. So for instance, the Tesla battery has its own liquid-cooled thermal management system. It's also got its own state of charge management system. And it's constantly looking to maintain the health of that battery to maximize the lifespan. In terms of recycling, lithium is, I think, second or third most common element in the Earth's crust. And so it's a pretty common thing. There's not a tremendous amount of recycling going on right now, just because there's not a huge volume of material that's being, end-of-lifed. But I think, just like with solar panels, eventually we're going to develop a full recycling capability within these industries.
Terrific. Thank you guys so much.